Okay. So here we are with another episode of American Cultural Shifts. My guest this evening is Dusty Emmert. Dusty is the president of Snyder Construction Group and Greenway Development. And I have known Dusty for the better part of 10 years. And Dusty puts up a lot of projects, and he is a very interesting and dynamic leader. And I thought he would have some good insights into some of the shifts that he's seeing in his industry. So, Dusty, thank you very much for joining me this evening, and just maybe just tell a little bit more about yourself, other than what I just mentioned there.
Sure. Yeah. Alan, thanks for having me. Again, my name is Dusty Emmert, president of Snyder Construction Group, and one of the managing members of Greenway Development Group. A little bit about our companies. Snyder Construction Group, we are a second generation family owned business, formed in 1978. I was actually, I'm a son-in-law to the founder. My father was actually a subcontractor of all things years ago to this organization. Met my wife in high school. We're high school sweethearts. Went through college, two different colleges, stayed together, came back together right after college, and actually went away for a couple of years, moved to Texas, and then was given the opportunity about 2001, or I'm sorry, 2002, to come back and be part of this business. And I've been president of that company since 2009. Terrible time for the business that we're in, but at a young age learned a lot about what the market can do, especially in our industry. Through that time, that business, we've grown it probably 500 times or 500% of what it was when we took that business over. And I was given an opportunity with a close friend about 7 years ago to actually form what we thought would be a small development group to do one project in Springfield, Missouri, 84 units, first micro efficiency apartment complex, I believe, in the state of Missouri at the time. Of course, everybody thought we were crazy. It actually went off very well for us. And then the past 7 years, we are over 1,000 units that we own, Midwest and also in Montana. And we currently have no investors in those properties. And so those are, long-term investments for us. And that's been a great thing for not only a construction company, but our family.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So, 20 years in the construction and development business, Dusty. So you've seen times of good times and bad during that. The '08 recession, and certainly with the pandemic. Talk a little bit about the cultural changes you're seeing, in your industry. And I'm particularly curious about maybe stories that your dad or your father-in-law had in comparison to what you're seeing now. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for my father-in-law, for my father, it was kind of, you do whatever it takes. And I think that even has been our motto up until the last few years with our group that has been with us for a long time. And so, we wear a lot of hats in our industry, in our business. It's not about titles, or it wasn't about titles. I've actually never been one to care that I'm a president of a company. It's just about, how we're going to get it done and how we're going to be profitable at the end of the day. So it was never about being the biggest. It was about being the best. And the last few years, that has definitely changed. So what we are seeing, not so much with some of our employees, depending on the age group, but new employees, there is an entitlement to what we do, and that entitlement is those people are wanting, that sooner than what it has been in the past. I mean, I grew up in this business and have been through, the trenches. I've worked in about every different position up to where I'm at. And, what we're seeing now is that people that, come out of college, they believe that they're a full-blown project manager, or maybe considered a full-blown superintendent. And that's not the case. But that's what they have been, what they've been taught and what they expect. And so it has definitely been a shift in the way we look at things.
So what do you think is driving that, Dusty? Why the shift? What's different in the last few years than, say, during when you were coming up, or even when your father or father-in-law were coming up? What do you think's different? What changed?
I think in our industry, it's been changing for some time. I don't believe it's just because of COVID. I think that has accelerated the anticipation to get those big titles. But like I said, I was actually running a dozer at 9, 10 years old. I even look at my son, which is now in college, and I didn't was not given the opportunity to put him to work because of labor laws and some things that weren't in place when I was younger. Yeah. And quite frankly, I learned the construction industry by being in the field. It wasn't what I learned in college. Now, what I learned in college was, the business side of things, and there was a lot of great things with college. But even pushing, you look past or prior to these construction management degrees, which were, somewhat new even when I received mine. I was in high school. Before that, there was shop class, and there was, there was different types. There was drafting classes, and those are no longer part of, high school curriculum. And what we have seen from, local high schools that we try to partner with is they try to push everyone to college. And quite frankly, there's a lot of students that probably would be better off, long-term as a career to look into a trade school, or maybe even come out and go right into the workforce for, someone like us, or one of our competitors, our subcontractors. And so we've seen a shift also that, the idea is everybody's got to have a college degree. And I think it's for a lot of us, but I think also what we are seeing is a lot of these tradesmen that we have, their salaries are starting to get to the point, because there's so few left in what we do, that they, quite frankly, are making the same amount of money or more than what we consider, a college grad.
So you're talking, when you say tradesmen, you're talking about draftsmen, electricians, plumbers, framers, all of those kinds of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, there's with plumbers and electricians, and then on the mechanical HVAC side, there's, there's programs, there's apprenticeships that they have to go through in order to become a master plumber or electrician. But what we have seen is, the high schools have started to pull away from, encouraging that to certain students, and that they should go, to a 4-year college.
Do you think, Dusty, is it the high schools? Is it the families? Is it, culture sort of writ large, I'll say, that's sort of saying a 4-year degree is the way to go? Or what do you think?
My opinion is that we discuss this in meetings weekly in our some of our executive staff meetings, that how are we going to go out to the high schools and even some of the whether it's OTC or some of these schools that have programs to teach the trades outside of the unions. And because we're in a non-union part of the state, we don't typically see that we have that training. The training's available, but much more limited than what we see in other parts of the state and parts of the country. But I believe, Alan, that what we have seen is that the high schools are pushing all students towards a 4-year degree.
And so, Dusty, play that out for me. So, okay, so you're having trouble, finding those workers. So, and I mean, over time, the ones you have, I mean, they're going to retire, age out, whatever. What happens to your industry? What happens to the construction industry as that sort of transforms, if there's not a backfill of the next generation of those kinds of workers to take their place?
What I believe is going to happen is that those general contractors and our trade partners, whether it be the framing crews, the plumbers, the electricians, the HVAC contractors, and everybody in between, whoever figures out, first of all, how to capture and keep those employees that are left, and then also be able to bring in, that workforce that, quite frankly, should go into something as a trade. I think that's who's going to rise to the top. Our industry is changing at a slower pace than a lot of industries, just because, constructing a new building, there's a lot of hands-on. So it's not that we can just put it into a computer and it spits out a building. Now, there is technology out there right now that there are people that are starting to try to print small facilities. I've been fortunate to meet someone overseas.
I'm sorry,
through IPO.
Tell us what that means. That means print a building.
Yeah, so basically 3D like printing? 3D printing. So there is multiple groups that are trying to figure out how you would 3D print a building. And they're doing it in third world countries for, small
housing and so forth.
Housing. Yeah. And it's pretty incredible. So there are people that are working on that type of advancement in what we do. And so, I mean, that will potentially be the future of what we do. Currently, it's not, especially on bigger facilities like we build. And there is a lot of, we're trying to figure out code requirements with that type of construction. So it works in different markets and different countries better than it does here in the US.
So, Dusty, talk about this that a little bit more. Okay, so there's these opportunities being created, let's say again, we'll call it third world countries, 3D printing houses and so forth. So in the United States, I mean, talk a little bit about what changes the demand, if you will, for commercial construction. Is it simply the economy? Is that the gist of it, or are there other things that really influence that, like available workforce and so forth?
I think it's a combination of everything. I mean, prior to, if you go back 6-7 years, I mean, you look at Amazon and some of these other, organizations that have decided that we can order everything from home. Our retail market dried up 5 or 6 years ago, which was 30% of what we built per year. So, it's definitely technology and industry driven on what type of products that we build annually, but also you take in COVID the last, 2.5 years. And, we have not built a lot of office space in very many markets over the last couple of years because we've learned to work from home. But our multifamily side of things has boomed, just like it has across the country, because people are moving from big markets because they can move to, areas where they would, kind of destination places to live. And so we're able to build a lot of different types of housing in markets that are, very appeasing for people to live in.
I see what you're saying. So instead of, say, living in a suburb of, I don't know, pick it, St. Louis, Chicago, whatever, and schlepping an hour into work every day, somebody says, "Hey, I love vacationing in Montana. I love fly fishing. I don't need to live in that suburb anymore because my job is online, or it can be done from a number of different places. So let's just move the family to Montana."
Yeah, absolutely. Montana, Florida,
Wherever,
you name
yeah.
the place, or wherever they want to be, whether it's coastal or somewhere in the the Rocky Mountains, as long as they have great internet access and that they are able to work remotely for for what they do. That is a huge part of our business right now, is the amount of housing that we're building in those markets.
Are Dusty, the people that you're selling or leasing these units to, do they have that story kind of like we've been to Montana before, we like Montana, we're moving to Montana, or something
absolutely.
like that?
Yeah, they they're kind of fed up with whether it's West Coast, East Coast, the cost of living first and foremost. They might be tired of the government for the state. There's all kinds of reasons, but they have figured out. And you take Montana. I believe Montana was the last state in the U.S. that had a case of COVID, and so for some reason, I remember I was there, and people were trying to influx themselves into Montana like there was a bubble over Montana,
Right.
which was not the case. But
Really
I do believe it was the last state that finally had a case of COVID. But also, it's a beautiful place to be, and the cost of living's much cheaper, or was, to move there versus some of the coastal states.
This is not my original observation. I think it was David Brooks, the author, that noticed this. That what you're seeing, particularly over the last 40 years, is you mentioned some people may be moving to Montana kind of tired of the government, and so his observation was this, that while we used to work in warehouses or maybe longshoremen, whatever, where you would have one political affiliation living next to another political affiliation in the same neighborhood, but what drew them there was their work. In other words, they were going to work in that warehouse, that manufacturing place, that longshore, whatever, that dock. That's where they were going to work, and they just coexisted. But today, as you just pointed out, you don't have to live there. Not as many people are working at that manufacturing plant or that dock or that whatever. And so I get to choose now kind of where I live. And it turns out maybe I want to choose to live around people who think like I do. And so that sort of results in this concentration of people. And so you get, the representation of those people being people like, say, Nancy Pelosi representing the San Francisco Bay Area, and you get Rand Paul representing Kentucky. And, those are polar opposites of one another. In other words, you don't have a bunch of people living in a neighborhood that are kind of amalgamated together and they try to choose somebody to represent them that they can kind of all agree on. Now, because you've done this sort of polarization, you end up electing people that represent the people that live there. So maybe that is really starting to happen. And maybe would you say that maybe COVID has accelerated that, at least in the construction and the development side? Because I mean, you're you're building a bunch of these things, right? A
Sure.
bunch of these units.
Yeah. So we are building, um, well, uh, on our construction side, we are building over 1,000 units annually a year. And a portion of those are ones that our development company own. And I would say that's probably 25% of those. Um, Now there is also another portion where we have a huge um, sector of our work is low income housing. And so we are also doing a lot of low income, LIHTC, RAD, um, assisted living projects
Oh, I see.
in multiple states. So,
Hmm.
and that is a different discussion, just because, but there is the demand for that right now is even greater than it's been in a long time, because quite frankly, the markets that we work in, which, we work from Montana kind of to the east. We're licensed in about 30 states. We're only working in about 8 of those states right now, but there are certain states and certain markets that it's all low income housing that we're doing.
So,
Um,
talk about that a little bit, Dusty. And so, how do you identify a market? In other words, some markets might be more ripe for assisted living, some
mhm,
for single family,
mhm.
multifamily. How is that study, or are those, is that data collected ahead of time, or are you doing
Yeah,
that work, or
that,
how do you determine what to build where?
sure. So there's a certain, or actually most states on the low income housing that we
Hmm.
construct or renovate, they actually will put out, the states will put out a report annually of where they believe it's needed for that specific state. And
I
so
see.
then those developers will compete for
Those
those
contracts.
areas. Yes. And then what we are doing, we are just the contractor on those projects. We're not
I
actually
see.
acting as a developer on the low income
I see.
properties. But I will tell you that with what we're doing in Montana, just to be clear, since we're talking about Montana, with the influx of people, the more market rate multifamily that we produce there, whether it's us or every other developer there,
Hmm.
there becomes a greater need for the low income and workforce housing, because costs are starting to rise there. Land is starting to rise. We all know the inflation that
Yeah,
we're seeing.
I
And
see.
so then with these big, these pockets of the markets that are booming, there becomes a greater need for housing for those
I
individuals and
see.
families that can't afford to live there anymore.
Right.
That used to be able to live there, but they can't because costs have got to where rent rates
Right.
have gone up. And so it kind of follows, these booms.
Oh, so interesting. So as you build the $500,000 units, let's say, in the wake of that comes a lot more, a lower cost housing, because you need that in those areas
Yeah,
once the
yeah,
population starts to fill into that area.
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I see.
and it may not cost, the cost are, other than the finishes, the construction, depending on the construction
Yeah.
type, would be relatively the same other than the finishes. But there's a need for housing for those people that we all rely on that can't, that don't have, positions like we do. Maybe they
Right.
work at a restaurant, or maybe they,
Right.
but the cost of living has tripled because of the boom and the need for all of these individuals that want to move there, where an apartment may have been $1,000 3 years ago and now it's $3,000. Well, the people that were there before that, they can't afford that kind of an
Right.
increase on rent, so they get
Sure.
booted from
from that
from those units. Yeah.
and are looking for some kind of subsidized
And
housing or something like that.
yeah.
I see.
Yep. Hmm.
I see. You know, Dusty, you mentioned a little bit ago. You said, that these changes that you're seeing, these shifts, both in the workplace and the work that you're doing, have been, it's been coming on over a number of years. What do you think about is there anything about the pandemic that changed that or accelerated it? Did it shift it, or was it just accelerated what was already happening before that? What do you think?
I think in terms of, I guess maybe I'll touch on a couple different parts of that. So in terms of, I'll take our staff and our first and foremost for our different companies. I do think that, we talk about how the economy is coming back. I kind of disagree that the economy is coming back. The economy was fantastic before COVID, hit. And thankfully it was. If we were in a bad economy before COVID hit, we'd all be in a different place than we are today. So, the news talks about how the economy is coming back. The economy was fantastic prior to COVID. And, we were fortunate, unlike a lot of companies where we were essential. So we were able to work through COVID, and we were very fortunate to be able to do that. Now it has, it has been stressful. Supply chain for every industry has changed, and it has made us rethink on how we manage our projects and how we try to keep things not only on budget but on schedule. We're purchasing things much more. Everything's purchased on the front end versus waiting like we did prior to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I do believe that, we lost, I think the number is, 2 or 3 million people have left the workforce for a multitude of reasons. And so, those people that we all rely on have become extremely more valuable. And in their minds, they've become more valuable as well, which, is fair, especially with competition and the amount of work that is still available in our industries. We've given significant raises, not just because of inflation, but because of demand for those individuals, which is, we talk about inflation, and I have probably raised our overhead salaries roughly 20% in the last 2 years.
Really?
And so it's pretty incredible, and probably 10 to 11% across the board for every other part of our business, whether it's project managers, superintendents, accounting staff, because quite frankly, they get phone calls every day from people looking for the same people we're looking for.
You had to do that almost as a defensive maneuver. Otherwise, you were going to start losing a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Do you think that you're talking a little bit about your father-in-law, your dad, your son. These are generational differences in a ways. You mentioned that, Dusty, that your dad, your father-in-law were sort of the era of, well, you do whatever it takes, right? It doesn't matter. Do you have trouble keeping workers? Once you got them, you're paying them well. Does that keep them there? Are there other things that you're needing to do to sort of keep the people that you have engaged? I'm not even talking about growing at this point, but just keeping the ones you have sort of, happy, engaged, and so forth.
Alan, we are. Salary is, for most people, not all, probably the biggest portion of that. I think with our primary business, most of our employees have company vehicles. I think that we're starting to see a trend that we used to provide what we thought was ample transportation. Now they're telling us what they should get for transportation. Whether that be, we provided a half-ton two-wheel drive, work truck that was new, and now they want a three-quarter-ton four-wheel drive crew cab pickup. We are starting to deal with that at all levels. Benefits have always, they're becoming, more and more prevalent.
So what kind of benefits?
We have always, historically, we felt like we had a fairly decent package. We have always paid 100% of our employees' health insurance. We've, had the standard, 401k, retirement. We match up to, I think it's about 4% at different levels. And so we felt like that has always been reasonable. But just in the last couple of weeks, I have people coming now that think that they should be deserved some form of ownership in the business, which is a whole nother level, but that is being offered by certain people. So there are extreme changes with our industry on what a benefit package would look like for key employees.
So that's interesting, Dusty. So you're saying that it's not just the usual stuff. It's not just health insurance, retirement, et cetera, vacations. It's, I want to own a piece of this.
Yep.
I don't want to just be a worker. I want to be an owner at whatever level, but because that's what they're getting offered other places. Is that a cultural shift in a way? In other words, I don't want to just be working on an hourly basis or a project basis. I want something ongoing out of this. Is that fair to say?
I think there's always been ownership opportunities in our industry based on the size of company you are. We have less than 100 employees between all of our businesses. But before I came back to this business, I worked for a company that had, they were the third largest construction company in the world. So there was all kinds of ownership opportunities, based on an ESOP type of program.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And so there are opportunities with larger companies for, and have been for a long time, but now we are starting to get pressure because of some of the offers that some of these larger firms have made, that they believe that there's an ownership opportunity for a small business like ours.
Have you seen that happen in your industry? Say, okay, so for example, in retail, groceries, et cetera, there's fewer companies that are larger. Is that happening in the construction industry because of things like this? Like, hey, I want an ownership interest. I'm better off going to a larger firm where I get those opportunities. Is that something that's starting to happen in construction now, or has it always been happening?
I think it's always been happening. I mean, I'll talk about our business. We have lost, even prior to COVID, I would say we lose one employee a year, which doesn't seem like a lot, or maybe two, to larger firms that offer maybe some of those benefits that look great on the cover, for like an ESOP type program. But what they find out when they get there, they are going to travel, they're going to move at a, within 30 days, they may be moving from coast to coast. They're going to work maybe a minimum of 6 hours, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day.
I see. So there's a price to pay for all that. Let's see. There we go.
All right. Sorry about that. I don't know
Oh,
if that was me or you.
I don't know what's. So yeah, so you were saying that
Yep.
that you, I mean, there's a price to pay for going to get that kind of ownership interest, and so are you're sort of have to meet them sort of halfway here
Sure.
to
Yeah.
remain competitive.
And they've got to decide, what's important to them. Is it, we're living in Southwest Missouri for the most part. I mean, we have people live in different states, but for the most part, our primary business is Midwest. Is it important for them to be in a place that's got a low cost of living? You're home almost every night. It's Monday through Friday, unless, schedules dictate something differently. Or is it that, you rent a home in the anticipation you're going to move yourself, your family, your kids, maybe quarterly, maybe annually, or per job. And when you do that, are you married to the hours that those
Right.
that those companies expect? So,
Right.
yeah, there is a happy medium. I think each person has to decide, what they want. But even some of our key employees, I mean, I'm not saying that they're not deserved, um, something in addition, but is ownership really the right thing with the amount of risks that we take in our business? Do they really want to put, their self and their families at risk with what we do? Because we are in a very high risk, low margin business, and it continues to kind of dwindle on what we have to do in order to make the annual revenues that we'd like to
Right.
make.
So, Dusty, as you look forward, then, as you look, the next 5, 10 years, your sons perhaps coming into the business. I mean, are there things that make you excited about the construction and development business that you look forward to, that you're hopeful about, or what is it that gets you kind of, in that place where you're excited for, the next 5 years, 10 years down the line?
We've been very fortunate that we've got a great group of people that work for us. We have for a general contractor on the construction side, we have a relatively young group, so a lot of them have been with us. So we have a plan for years to come with our key team, which is somewhat unique to our business. And that transition is starting to change for a lot of other businesses as well, with some of the baby boomers and parents, and whether it's family business or not, that are starting to exit our industry. But fortunately for us, we got a great group of clients. But what we're trying to build on ourselves is, we've been very blessed with this development piece of what we do. We feel like we're working in markets that don't compete with our other clients. And so we're doing some things that are, going to add to the revenue stream, not only for the construction side, but, quite frankly, for our development piece and our family. So what excites me, Alan, is that, we found this little piece that, quite possibly at some point could be a big portion of what we do on an annual basis, where we're building, potentially for ourselves. And we always want to keep, those key clients that have helped us to where we're at today, But if we could add that piece in markets where they don't work and we're doing some things that would never compete with them, that's something that I feel is pretty special for what we're doing right now.
Yeah, very good. Very good. All right. Well, Dusty, thank you so much for joining me this evening. And this has really been great. Really, very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a a construction and development, an old industry, but so many new things happening. I mean, you think about what you're talking about. 3D printed facilities, and people really changing what you're building because people are moving and not living the same way that they were even 10 years ago. I mean, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
hey, thank you very much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
I appreciate
Yep.
it. Okay.
All right. Have a good
All right.
night.
Talk to you later. Bye bye.